Welcome to another of my lectures in comparative religions for my Anglo-American University students. But again, if you're not from AAU and you want to listen in, you are more than welcome. This is going to be a lengthier one than the first one, or maybe not. I don't know. Let's find out, shall we? So we are going to talk about Vedic Hinduism. That is the first and oldest expression of Hinduism that we know of. Let me give you a short definition of Vedic Hinduism. I like to kind of give a thumbnail description to help students assimilate what they're supposed to assimilate. So, a Vedic Hindu believes that the universe is inhabited by gods and demons, and so he or she worships many gods or one god as preeminent, as a favorite among many gods, as taught in the sacred writings known as the Vedas, through very precise rituals and magic, and by doing his or her caste duty so that life would go well with him or her and his or her family. So this is what some religion scholars call the way of works, the Vedic Hindu. It is all about practice. And if you recall, for those of you who are in my AAU class, it is similar to African traditional religions, as we'll see, except, and the difference is, that there is an emphasis upon a written tradition, namely the Vedas. So let's break this definition down and look at each in turn. So, what do we mean by the Vedas? Generally, when people talk about the Vedas, what most scholars call the Vedas, they are actually referring to what is known as the Samhitas, the oldest writings that we have in the Vedas. They are 4 collections of Hindu writings in Sanskrit, which is a language that is now used only in the Vedas. Veda means literally knowledge, or that which was revealed to holy men who wrote it down for future generations. There are 4 of these Vedas: the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajur Veda, and the Atharva Veda. The Rig Veda, composed from 1500 to 700 BC, although the last chapter religion scholars think is much later because of the subject matter, and we'll talk about that later when we get to Vedantic Hinduism. And these dates are rather speculative, so keep that in mind. But the Rig Veda contains hymns to many different gods that were to be used during sacrifice ceremonies. The last chapter, as I said, is more intellectual and speculative, and so is thought to be a later addition, somewhere around 200 BC perhaps, when they started asking these kind of very deep philosophical questions that you find more in Vedantic Hinduism. And those themes are picked up in later Hindu literature, the Aranyakas and the Upanishads. The Sama Veda is a little later than the Rig Veda. It contains songs or chants for use by priests, which are thought to refer to a ritual associated with Soma. What is Soma? Soma refers to several different things. Soma refers to a sacred drink that was made, called Soma, that was made from a certain hallucinogenic plant or a mushroom, also known as Soma, that grew on the mountains in that region. Nobody knows for sure what it actually was. But what is for sure is that the thing that they sell to tourists in India now, called Soma, is not Soma. It's not hallucinogenic in in that way. Although, I mean, they may sell hallucinogenic drugs, but I never got any. Um, so in the song, the in the songs of the Samaveda, soma can refer to the plant or a deity of the same name or the drink. The Yajurveda is a later collection that consists of mantras. Mantras are short verses that are recited by priests when doing their duties at sacrifices, and it repeats much of what you find in the Rig Veda. And finally, the Atharva Veda is the latest of the Samhitas, and it's different from the others because it contains magic spells and incantations used to control the spirit world so that you can have good health and protection and success and health for your family and falling in love and stuff like that. It is thought to reflect a popular version of the emerging religion versus the official version of the priests. All right, so attached to the Samhitas are other writings. The first that deserves mention is the Brahmanas. These are composed later than the Samhitas. The Brahmanas are priestly commentaries on the Samhitas. As the numbers of deities grew, so too the number of rituals that needed to be performed, and so the Brahmanas were written. They spell out the rules for rituals and prayers during rituals, and later the Brahmanas would give reasons behind the rituals through stories about the gods. We do this because this happened, yada, yada, yada. The sutras are another set of writings attached to each of the Samhitas. Sutra literally means threads. These are collections of short rules for the priests and the people to follow, as well as summaries of Vedic doctrine that help memorizing the Vedas, that help priests and people to memorize what's in the Vedas. Later, the term was expanded to refer to any sort of religious writing in both Hinduism and Buddhism. And finally, the Aranyakas, or the forest books. They were composed near the end of the Vedic period, probably for holy men and ascetics known as forest dwellers or sannyasins. These writings take the rituals and the stories of the Vedas and give them a symbolic meaning. This is the starting point for the later philosophical speculation of the Upanishads, and the Upanishads become of central importance in Advaita Vedantic Hinduism, which we're going to talk about later. We won't talk about the Upanishads in much detail right now. And there are a couple other books that are not attached to a specific Veda. One is the Code of Manu, which was composed in the later Vedic period. This book is supposed to be the revelation of the will of the gods for all humans. Manu is the mythical ancestor of all human beings, and it gives laws covering every part of Hindu society, whether as an individual or as a part of a caste or as a part of a family, what a father is supposed to do, what a kshatriya, tribal member, is supposed to do, and so forth. The Code of Manu therefore solidified the caste system that was taught in the Rig Veda by making it into law. And just to clarify, I keep talking about the Vedic period. For those in my AAU class, you will know that the Vedic period runs from 1500 to 600 or 500 BC, followed by the Vedantic period, which runs roughly from 600 to 300 BC or 200 BC, somewhere around there, with a revival in 800 AD. And the Bhakti Hinduism starts somewhere in the beginning of the Christian era, the 1st century AD, and continues, and that's the dominant form today. So, Code Code of Manu, very important for Bhakti Hinduism, which we will address later. Oh, I'm sorry. Not the Code of Manu is important for the Vedic, Vedantic, and Bhakti. What I was thinking about was the epics. The epics stem from early oral tradition, but are written down in the late Vedic period, and they tell stories and adventures of the gods and all of their doings. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata are the most important of these two. These are central for Bhakti Hinduism, and we will talk more about that when when we get to Bhakti. Okay, so if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, here's one way of breaking it down. The Shruti is the oral tradition, that which is heard, passed on by a holy man, which were written down as the Vedas, and you have 4 of these: the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, and are expressed. Each of these 4 are expressed in this collection of 4 different parts: the Samhitas, which are the original hymns, the oldest part of the Vedas; the Brahmanas, which is ritual explanation and rules for priests; the Aranyakas, which are the forest texts, where things start getting a little symbolic; and the Upanishads, which are philosophical and much more important for later Vedantic Hinduism. But please note that the writings attached to a certain Samhitas and to a certain Veda, let's say the Rig Veda, will not necessarily have the same name. So, for example, the Brahmanas for the Yajur Veda is called the Shatapatha, or the Brahmanas of 100 Paths, and it's about the sky god Brahma and how he arose out of the first sacrifice. So basically, you could spend your whole life just digging into this stuff and figuring out which goes with which. So believe it or not, students, I'm giving you a simplified version. Now, let's move from the writings to the Vedic pantheon, the gods of the Vedas. Some things to remember: the Vedic pantheon was not static. The numbers of gods and the significance of each of these gods changes even as the Vedas are still being composed, even as the Samhitas are still being composed. After the Vedas were complete, some of these gods disappear, others change names. So keep that in mind. For instance, there may be some remnants of an original sky god, like we saw in African traditional religions, like a god called Dyaus Pitar. It seems to be a god who was once worshipped as all-powerful, but by the time the Vedas were written, he was only a distant memory. But it's hard to be sure, because in the Vedas there are several named supreme gods, Lord of all the gods, and so forth. And why is that? Well, this is possibly because worshippers sought to flatter the god they were worshiping at that time, and they wanted not to anger this god, so that they could get the blessings that they wanted. And for Vedic Hinduism, material blessings are all important. So they would say to the fire god, "Oh Agni, you are the sustainer and mover of the universe, only you." And then they would say to another god, "Oh, you are the most important god." And so it's hard to determine which god is the ruler, though we can guess. Or the reasons why there were several all-powerful gods is that the writings in the Samhitas and other Vedic other writings of the Vedic religion, is a collection of a number of different tribal religions, each tribe having its own favorite god, right? That's what we called henotheism. There seems to have been a move towards, or maybe from, henotheism. That is, a worshiping as one god, although you acknowledge that other gods exist. And that could account for why there are in the Vedas, even in the Rig Veda, several addresses to, oh, you are the most all-powerful god, and so forth. What does seem clear is that during the Vedic period, elements of the rituals themselves, that is, the fire used in the sacrifice, the intoxicating drink soma, and the words said in prayer, these elements themselves become gods that are immensely important within the Vedic pantheon, as we shall see later. All right, so let's talk about some of these gods, some of the more important ones. First, we're going to talk about Indra. Indra was the supreme ruler of the gods during the Vedic period. He is seen as the creator of the universe. He is sometimes shown as a violent and soma drunk god of storm, and he is the god of all warriors. He is locked in a cosmic battle with Vritra, a serpent demon who causes drought. Sometimes Vritra is shown as a serpent or a dragon, although not in this picture. So people need rain to prosper, and so it's demonic when that rain is withheld. Very, very similar to the Babylonian myth of Marduk, the warrior who slays the mother dragon goddess Tiamat and opens and allows the waters to flow. Slices are open and allowing the waters to flow out and so forth. And in fact, by defeating Vritra, that allowed the earth to exist, like Marduk defeated Tiamat and allowed the creation waters to exist, and everything was created out of them. So Indra defeats Vritra with his mighty thunderbolt, thus restoring balance and prosperity to the cosmos, and allowing rains to fall and crops to be planted and so forth. He is worshipped in almost 1/4 of the hymns in the Rig Veda. Some see in Indra an echo of a real Aryan warrior king, because Indra in the Vedas fights the Dasyas, the dark-skinned opponents of the Aryans, who some have linked to the present day, as ancestors to the present day Dravidians of southern India. Indra is the most human-like of all the gods. In some stories he is said to have fair hair, and he had a beard at birth because he's manly man. And at birth he is said to have emerged from his mother's side. And we'll see that again when we study the legends associated with the Buddha. Why did he have to come out of his mother's side? Because the birth canal, the regular vaginal birth, is also where a woman's monthly uncleanness comes out. And so you can't have a god coming out of something that is unclean. So Indra took a shortcut. In later Hindu literature, however, Indra becomes a title of King of Heaven, and whichever god defeats the current title holder becomes the current Indra. Then there is Varuna. Varuna is the sky god who replaced Pitar, but in the Vedas you can see his position already starting to deteriorate. He starts out as very important, though he becomes less and less important in worship, even as Indra becomes more and more important. He is seen as the one Indra sets in charge of the moral and natural order of the universe. He is mentioned in about 33 of the hymns in the Rig Veda. Varuna dwells in upper space and watches how people behave. He sends punishments such as diseases upon those who misbehave. He knows everything, even what people think or plan. To those who are truly sorry for their sins, Varuna forgives them graciously, and in every hymn to Varuna, there is a prayer for forgiveness. Now, sin can either be some morally bad thing that you did, or an error in ritual which would upset the god, and you could never quite be sure what you did wrong. So that's why you always pray for forgiveness in every hymn. Varuna not only gives the moral code that keeps the balance of the universe, but he sustains the moral order, and in Sanskrit that is rta, R-T-A. Some Sanskrit scholars connect this word to the later idea of karma, that is, every moral action has a natural consequence because of the law order of the universe. We will look into that more in Vedantic Hinduism. It's not as important for Vedic Hinduism. Varuna also rules the cosmos by his cosmic skill and craftiness, called Maya. Later in the Upanishads, Maya takes on the meaning of illusion. That is, the world that surrounds us, which seems so real, isn't. It's Maya. It's an illusion. So even though Varuna is not very significant in Vedic times, there are several ideas that are associated with Varuna that become very important in later versions of Hinduism. You could think of Indra and Varuna as two aspects of the earlier sky god Jauspitar. Indra represents the warrior and victor aspect, while Varuna represents the judge or moral guardian aspect of Jauspitar. Rudra. Rudra is father of the Maruts, and he is celebrated in only 3 hymns of in the Vedas, in the Rig Veda. So he is of little importance during the Vedic period, though he becomes extremely important later in Bhakti. He lives on a mountain and he sends storms. Rudra is seen as unpredictable and dangerous, and therefore people feared him and pleaded with him to be auspicious, to be of good omen. And the word for that is Shiva. Rudra, please be Shiva to us. Be Shiva. And Shiva, and therefore Rudra becomes connected with, or morphs into, changes into Shiva, who appears much later in Hindu literature. Rudra can be kind as well, which fits well with the later god of Bhakti Hinduism, Shiva, who is known as both the sustainer of the universe and the destroyer of the universe. Vishnu. Vishnu is only mentioned 3 times in the Samhitas, in the Vedas, but later he becomes a very important god with many worshippers. In the Vedas, he is known for his 3 giant steps by which he traverses the world, thought to refer to the sun in its 3 positions at dawn, at noonday, and at dusk. He therefore is thought of as a sun god. He is also an ally of Indra in their common battle against the demon Vritra. Agni was originally the fire used in the sacrifice, and later he becomes the god of fire. He is a very important god during the Vedic period. He is the god who consumes the sacrifice, like the fire consumes the sacrifice. And he is the one who, like smoke, travels upward. He carries the petitions and prayers and pleadings and requests of the people upwards into the realm of the gods. He is, quote, he whose mouth is a spoon, close quote, and, quote, butter-backed, close quote, because of the clarified butter known as ghee, G-H-E-E, that was spooned into the fire during the ritual. It makes the fire leap up because all of that oil. Then there is Soma, or also known as Chandra. Soma is the god of drink and rain, fertility, and the moon. Since this drink makes one or made one feel immortal, he is also the god of immortality. Over time, Soma became merged with the moon god Chandra. Chandra drives his white chariot across the sky. And the moon was, in the later Vedic texts, considered a cup to hold the Soma drink. And I'm going to read to you now a hymn to Soma from the Rig Veda. And this will give you some idea of what Soma, the drink was all about. Like wild winds, the drafts have raised me up. The winds have raised me up. Have I been drinking Soma? The drafts have borne me up as swift steed a chariot. Have I been drinking Soma? Frenzy has come upon me as a cow to her dear calf. Have I been drinking Soma? As a carpenter bends the seat of a chariot, I bend this frenzy round my heart. Have I been drinking Soma? Not even as a dust speck in my eye do the 5 tribes count with me. He's referring to the castes, which we'll talk about later. Not even as a dust speck in my eye do the 5 tribes count with me. Have I been drinking Soma? The heavens above do not equal 1/2 of me. Have I been drinking Soma? In my glory I have passed beyond the sky and the greater earth. Have I been drinking Soma? I will pick up the earth and put it here or put it there. Have I been drinking Soma? And I think we can confidently answer yes. Yes, very likely you have been drinking Soma if you're picking up the earth and stuff like that. So since Soma was liquid like rain, Soma was also the god of rivers, but he's also identified with sun and storm and fertility. About 3/5 of all of the hymns in the Rig Veda are addressed either to Soma or Agni. They are very important gods during this period. Brahmana, apologies for the picture being sort of too big. Brahmanaspati is originally referred to as the word spoken at the sacrifice. So, and it is spelled, since for some reason this slide got all messed up, excuse me guys, but he's spelled Brahmanaspati. And that referred to the word spoken at the sacrifice. Since saying the proper words was so important if the sacrifice was going to be really, truly effective, the spoken word itself becomes a god who eventually becomes one of the highest conceptions of God in Hinduism, at Vedantic Hinduism, known as Brahman. Now, there are different spellings and meanings derived from Brahmanaspati, which you have to keep straight. I'm sorry, this is just how it is. They all sound kind of alike, but you have to keep them straight in your mind. There are the Brahmanas, which we talked about, priestly commentaries on the Samhitas, on the Vedas. There is Brahma, who is a creator god, a personal god of the Vedic era. Not hugely important, but he's still there. There is Brahmin, which is a priest or the priestly caste, or known as Brahmins, and Brahman, which is an impersonal pantheistic god force that exists in everything. The world is God because of Brahman, and that is an important idea in the next phase of Hinduism that we will look at later, Advaita Vedantic Hinduism. So, in summary, Of the Vedic deities, Indra, king of the gods, Agni, the god of fire, and Soma, the god of intoxicating drink, are the most important. They're the ones that get most attention in worship. All right, let's talk about rituals and magic. As ritual becomes more important in the Vedic period, the rituals themselves take on a magical quality. The words and actions began to be seen as having a power of their own, a power great enough to even force the gods to do the worshippers' will, which is risky territory to be messing around with, trying to get a god to do your will. Therefore, it was important that the rituals were done correctly by experts, professional priests, because if you did something wrong, the results could be disastrous for you and your family. The Brahmins became extremely powerful during this period, although you can see some more popular folk rituals probably done by non-priests in the Atharva Veda as well. So let me give you some examples of rituals. There was the everyday puja. Puja originally meant in sacrifice, but now it refers to in Hinduism any type of ritual. If a Hindu says, I need to go do puja, he's doing their the daily rituals. So everyday puja is performed 2 or 3 times a day, and I'm talking about the Vedic period now. Was performed 2 to 3 times a day around a cooking fire, or a fire that is specially lit for the ceremony. Agni, the god of fire, would be praised, as well as other gods. Milk and or soma juice were poured out for the gods to drink. Clarified butter, ghee, was spooned onto the fire to make it leap up. Grain cakes, cereal cakes were offered, as well as sweet-smelling things such as sandalwood and flowers and perfume. Food items were given to the gods, as well as meat from sacrificed animals. This was during the Vedic times. Modern-day Hinduism doesn't do animal sacrifice that much. It still happens from time to time. There were also important rites of passage. The first rite of passage happened even before birth. That was when a child is conceived, called sindur. When a man finds that his wife is pregnant, he would apply paste from the ground petals of a red flower to the part in her hair in order to ward off evil spirits. This sometimes happens at weddings as well. It does not necessarily mean that the bride is pregnant. Just if you're at a Hindu wedding, just don't make a faux pas. At birth, a Brahmin priest may accompany the midwife to make sure that there are no knotted cords in all the house. And you can see the magical thinking that's involved there. Knotted cords could produce a knotted umbilical cord, which would be dangerous for the baby. Then there is child dedication. The child might be dedicated, it probably would be dedicated to a specific god or goddess, such as Periyarchi. This is Periyachi, whose fierceness was believed to scare off demons. She is often pictured tearing the intestines out of a demon. And I guess it's a female demon in this picture. But you want somebody fierce on the side of your child. There is a child naming ceremony. The child receives a public name and a secret name, often chosen by astrology or as a way to honor a god. And then there is the eating of the first solid food, a ritual called Annaprasana. And this occurs around 6 to 8 months. The whole family will wait for an auspicious date, which means odd months for girls, even months for boys. They dress the child in special clothing, as you can see in the picture. And the maternal uncle feeds the child his or her first bit of rice. Then at 1 year, the child has his first haircut, and that marks him as a student, but he will not actually study the Vedas until he's 10 years old for boys of the upper three castes only. And there's a special initiation into Vedic study. But as you can see, the kid studying the Vedas still has his hair shaved, so short hair. Then there is marriage, which is an important marriage rite. In a Hindu marriage, the bride and the groom knot their clothes together to show their unity, and they walk 3 times in 7 steps around a sacred fire, articulating promises to each other. And this fire is lit specially for this ceremony. In hotels or marriage venues in India, there will often be a fire pit in the middle of the place where they hold weddings. The groom will then place a red dot on his bride's forehead, which means that she's taken, she's a married woman, don't anybody mess with her. However, for modern day Hindus, the red dot is optional. Sometimes non-married women have it. It's sort of a fashion statement nowadays. Also, arranged marriage is still the norm for most upper caste Hindus, although some may rebel and have what they would call love marriages, like we have in the West. And then there is the final rite of passage, the funeral ritual, or death. If you know that you are dying, then you try to do it by the Ganges River or by some other sacred stream to kind of carry your soul away. After death, the body will be wrapped and perfumed in preparation for cremation, which happens within 24 hours of death. There is a funeral procession that carries the body on a pallet, on a platform, covered with flower necklaces, led by the chief male member, perhaps the eldest son of the household. The funeral pyre, the fire, is constructed according to ritual patterns. The head of the procession then lights the fire. When the fire has consumed the body, the leader walks around the fire counterclockwise 4 times. The ashes are then gathered and thrown into a sacred river. 8 to 30 days later, since all the mourners were made impure by being near a dead body that was being burned, they must be purified in a ceremony involving a Brahmin priest who offers a prayer to speed the dead man's soul to the world of the ancestors. Sometimes, although now very, very rarely, the wife of the dead man will throw herself onto the funeral pyre, allowing herself to be burned with his body. This is known as sati. It honors her husband and gives him great merit for the afterlife. And for the woman, it gives her the chance to earn merit herself and come back as a man in her next life. Not so much for Vedic, for later versions of Hinduism, where reincarnation becomes a big deal. But reincarnation is not something that was in the earliest Vedic Hinduism. Sati was banned during British colonialism. It is my understanding that sometimes it still happens in the villages, though thankfully very rarely. It doesn't happen in urban centers where people are a little bit more modernized. But it's amazing, for this 3,000-year-old religion, that there are still social pressures for a woman to commit sati. So, in summary, rituals are, therefore, a super important part of Vedic Hinduism in order to please a god and make life go well with you. The various rites of passage serve to protect the worshipper and his or her family from demons and evil spirits. In other words, Vedic Hinduism is still very much an animistic, polytheistic, or possibly henotheistic religion. Lastly, let's address the caste system. As important as ritual is in Vedic Hinduism, doing your caste duty is just as important. And this is spelled out in both the Vedas and the Code of Manu. And this is from the Rig Veda. The man, this cosmic man who represents the whole of the cosmos or all of humanity, has 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 feet. He pervaded all earth on all sides and extended beyond it as far as 10 fingers. It is the man who is all this, whatever has been and whatever is to be. He is the ruler of immortality when he grows beyond everything through food. Such is his greatness, and the man is yet more than this. All creatures are a quarter of him. 3/4 are what is immortal in heaven. With 3/4 the man rose upwards, and 1/4 of him still remains here. From this he spread out in all directions into that which eats and that which does not eat. From him Viraj was born. That is the female generative principle by which women are able to give birth and fertility and all that good stuff. And from Viraj came the man. When he was born, he ranged beyond earth, behind, and before. Now, scholars think this refers to an actual human sacrifice that was done in early Vedic Hinduism. Not done anymore, obviously. When the gods spread the sacrifice with the man as the offering, spring was the clarified butter, the ghee, summer the fuel, and autumn the oblation. They anointed the man, the sacrifices born at the beginning upon the sacred grass. With him the gods, sadhyas, and sages sacrificed. From the sacrifice in which everything was offered, the melted fat was collected, and he made it into those beasts who live in the air, in the forests, and in villages. From that sacrifice in which everything was offered, the verses and chants were born. The mantras were born. The meters were born from it. And from it the formulas were born. Horses were born from it, and those other animals that have 2 rows of teeth. Cows were born from it. And from it goats and sheep were born. Now, here comes the part that has to do with the castes. When they divided the man, into how many parts did they apportion him? How many parts did they divide him up into? What do they call his mouth, his 2 arms, and thighs, and feet? His mouth became the Brahmin, the priest class. His arms were made into the warrior, the kshatriyas, the warrior caste. His thighs, the people, and from his feet, Vaishyas, the people, and from his feet, the servants, the Shudra, were born. The moon was born from his mind, and from his eye the sun was born. Indra and Agni came from his mouth, and from his vital breath the wind was born, and so forth and so on. But that's how the castes are. That's where the castes came from this dividing of a human being into different parts. The Sanskrit for caste, and again, Sanskrit is only used in the Vedas. The word for caste is varna, which means literally color, and this suggests that the caste originally had something to do with skin color. Hinduism really got started when light-skinned Aryan conquerors wanted to keep made their way into the Indus Valley. And they wanted to keep their privileged place among the darker-skinned people of the Indus Valley. In other words, the caste system probably started as a type of institutional racism or institutionalized racism, and it still functions that way. The lower castes tend to be darker skinned, as in this picture, and lighter skinned is considered desirable. When my son and I went to India for 10 days, and the hotel we were staying at delivered daily newspapers, every day you would see an ad there for these powders or creams guaranteed to make your skin at least 3 shades lighter. Which, okay. Having a light skin is seen as a type of privilege. Many Hindus will say, and when I asked Indian people, they said, no, it has nothing to do with skin color. It's just has to do with occupation. Occupation is what it's from. But honestly, when my son and I were in India, having light skin, we stuck out like sore thumbs or white thumbs, and B, you were just treated like a VIP. We went to the front of lines and stuff like that. When our luggage was lost by Air India, the hotel manager took us to the Air India office, and he just kind of breezed past this other Indian guy who turned out to be an American student, who was visiting India, but he was darker skinned, and we just kind of blew past him, and I was like, I'm sorry, I think this guy was here first. And the guy then said in an American accent, hey, thanks, man, I appreciate that. But it's like, light skin means something. And I've heard from black people that having darker skin in India, you get treated with some disrespect. So at least to my eyes, it looks like this has to do with skin color. Now, the first 3 castes, the upper 3 castes, are known as twice born. That is, you have gained enough good karma, enough merit to have been reincarnated into an upper caste. And these 3 castes are allowed full participation in Hindu life, including the studying of the Vedas, puberty initiation, and social leadership. Male members of twice-born castes are recognized as those who are able to study the Vedas by having a cord looped around one shoulder. You can see it in these 2 guys if you look real carefully. That cord is worn at all waking times and is changed once a year. So here's a diagram of the caste. The Brahmins, and that should be, I think he misspelled it. I think it's Brahmin, not Brahmans. The Brahmins are the mouth, right? They're the ones who teach the people. They say the words at the ceremony. They're the ones who know what they're doing. The Kshatriyas are the arms. They're the warriors, because you hold a sword with your arms. You hold a bow with your arms. And they tend to be warriors, rulers, government workers, landowners. The Vaishyas are the legs that support the rest of the body, and they are merchants, traders, business people. And then the Shudra are the feet, and they exist to support the upper 3 and keep them away from unclean things, like your feet keep you from the dirt. They are farmers, herders, manual workers. And then there are the outcasts, and they work with waste, dead bodies, dead animals, or whatever, things that would make you unclean. And we will have more to say about the outcasts later. Let's get into the various castes in more detail. So the Brahmins are priests and scholars of the Hindu religion. They devote their lives to the study of the Vedas and to Vedic ritual. Most of the priests officiating at Hindu temples, however, are not actually Brahmins, and they may not even be twice born. Brahmin priests make themselves available not for the daily pujas, but only for special ceremonies such as the fire ritual or rites of passage. The Kshatriyas are warriors, rulers, government workers, and so forth. Scholars believe that in ancient Indian history, there was a long battle over the top, who got to be the top caste. And it is a testimony to the central role of religion in India that the priests, the Brahmins, finally won. The Vaishyas are business owners, landowners, and skilled craftsmen. Their skills economically support the upper castes, like the legs support the rest of the body. The Shudras are common laborers. They exist to support the upper three castes. They are considered impure and unclean. In some parts of India, if someone from an upper caste touches them, they will be defiled. They will be impure. And then there are the untouchables, or pariahs, or as they are known in official Indian literature, scheduled castes, or the SCs. They're not really considered a caste. They are a category for those without a proper castes. They are outcasts. They're not a caste. They're outside of the caste system, but still kind of oppressed by it, because they are those whose occupations makes them unclean, like tanners of leather, sewage workers, those who take away dead bodies. And if even the shadow of an untouchable touches a member of an upper caste, they will be unclean. Now, students sometimes ask me, does that mean I'm an outcast? No, you're a visitor. And so the caste system you're a foreigner in India, so the caste system doesn't apply to you in the same way. Outcasts have virtually no standing in Hindu society. They have few rights that are actually enforced. They have rights in the constitution, but often not enforced, and more so in urban centers than in the countryside. They call themselves Dalits, which means oppressed or ground down. Their condition has improved a little since Mahatma Gandhi referred to them as the children of God, or Harijans, which is a word that you sometimes hear used of Dalits, of outcasts. The government policies, at least historically, I don't know so much if it's under Modi, but for a long time, government policies would favor the SCs, the scheduled castes, giving sort of like affirmative action, giving them places in universities and places in government jobs and so forth. But there is still vicious prejudice against them. The Code of Manu. Oh, yes. This is these are newspapers. I had a friend in India who would send me newspaper stories. He was a Dalit, and he would send me newspaper stories of things getting injustice being done to scheduled castes. I'm not going to read this through. It will be on the PowerPoint that I will post on Neo. But or you can just freeze the frame and read it right here if you wish. This is still from that Guardian article. Oh yes, and I uh, actually mentored a thesis by Hana Novotna. Oh, it must have been 15 years ago, but it'll be in the library or it'll be accessible, digitized. And she did a really good thesis on the caste system in post-colonial India. Okay, the Code of Manu teaches that these castes are absolutely inflexible. You may not switch castes. You may not marry outside of your caste. Um, it is it is common that if a lower caste person falls in love with an upper caste person, the upper caste person family may murder the pair, which is known as an honor killing. Um, when I and my son were in India, uh, as I mean, a while ago, it was his high school graduation present. Um, we saw this in the paper several times, that or throwing acid on the face of the woman. Later, as the caste system became entrenched, there arose a number of subcastes or divisions within the castes, especially within the lower castes, so that people could be, so that even if you were really, really low down, you could still be above someone, even if you were below others. This is one of the reasons why Hana Novotna in her thesis found out this is one of the reasons why the scheduled castes, the untouchables, cannot or will not, why social reform has been so slow for them, because they cannot or will not unite. Instead, those places at university or the government jobs or stuff go to the upper tribes within the outcasts. And those upper tribes work for their own benefit rather than for the benefit of the whole caste. Technically, according to law, according to their constitution, discrimination on the basis of caste is illegal in India, but prejudice dies very slowly and with great difficulty. It is impossible to make laws that change people's hearts, especially when they are informed by an ingrained cultural system with roots in a religion 3,000 years old. That doesn't change in a few decades or even a few generations. Now, towards the end of the Vedic period, priests had become very powerful because only they knew how to do the rituals correctly. The performance of these rituals became more important than what you actually believed about the gods. Neither the ordinary worshippers nor the priests needed even to understand what the rituals meant for the rituals to be effective. As long as you said the right words and the right things were done, it would work like magic. It was kind of a type of magic. And that made the priests very powerful because they were the ones who knew how to do the rituals correctly. One mistake in a ritual, as I said before, could bring disaster on your house, on your family, on your town. So for certain rituals, priests were paid very well for their services. Now, I want you to imagine that you are a non-priest living at this time. You grow up going to rituals where nobody cares what they mean. They're just words, but the priest has to be respected because they alone are powerful. How would you feel? Would you be tempted to look for something else, something better? And that, my dear students, is where we will begin our discussion of Vedic Hinduism in our next class. Okay? So I'm going to leave it at that. And you guys write your questions, and I will look over them, and we will talk about them, about Vedic Hinduism in discussion and in class discussion. For those of you who aren't in my class, I hope you had a good time and learned something. So take it easy, and I will see you in the next video. Or I won't see you, but you'll hear from me. Bye-bye.